the scarecrow. In the last video, my dragons voted, and it resulted in a tie. I broke the tie in favor of Jessica Rabbit, but I also really wanted to draw the other top choice. This means that I'll be drawing some of the cast of The Wizard of Oz. This is looking like it'll be a 6-part series. I'm planning to cover Dorothy's main party, as well as the Wicked Witch and the Wizard of Oz himself. During my early sketching stage, a theme for this set emerged: Revenge of the Deathless. A warning: if you're expecting a faithful one-to-one matching of Baum's stories, you won't find it here. It shouldn't even be a surprise at this point. I'm taking massive liberties. The man who would become the Scarecrow started as one of the Wizard of Oz's laboratory temple guards. An honorable position, but one where there was just as much danger inside as out. As so often happened to the wizard's guards, he became an unwitting test subject. The experiments he was subjected to were a part of an attempt to extend the life of mortal bodies. In this case, he was preserved through a mysterious process that was a mix of mummification and taxidermy. The result was a shambling and inelegant failure. But Oz saw one last use for his former guard. He was sent to patrol the outer perimeter of his kingdom, on the border of the wilds. One of the worst tasks, with the shortest life expectancy. How would this stuffed man fare out there? If he survived long enough, the procedure may be reproduced to create a small army of less troublesome servants. Since he was full of straw anyway, they created a mockery of the perimeter guard's usual costume. It's designed to intimidate predators. A pterosaur head with some flared wings. On the inside, he has large eye spots, similar to the ones the shipwright has sewn into layers of his own cloak. During the process of his recreation, one of his legs was permanently damaged, so they made him an artificial one to keep him mobile for patrols. And there we don't have it. Not yet. I thought I was done, but I stepped away from it for a bit, and when I came back, he wasn't what I was hoping for. He's just kind of standing there. All the narrative elements I wanted are present in the design, but despite his horrendous condition, he is still alive. I decided it was worth taking the time to redraw him, with a more dynamic pose, a thinner figure, and a stronger silhouette. His wings are now a bit wider, his pterosaur hair is a little more obvious. On his old, dried skin, you can see some of the touring pattern scars where Oz had applied his abominable craft. Rather than using red as a core color, I switched it to the wizard's thematic green. He's wearing the tattered remains of his old guard livery. The last step was to give him a straw skirt referencing pagan ritual straw costumes. The designs of his armor and weapon hint at the Art Deco-influenced kingdom of the wizard. The blade on his staff and his one remaining eye are made from green glass. That felt much better. Now there we have it. The antediluvian scarecrow. He will join Dorothy in an attempt to take revenge against the Watcher Oz for the life and death that was taken from him. Next week, we'll see if I can wrap up page 7 and design the next of Oz's creations. Thanks for watching. One of the hardest things to do is follow your own advice. Before drawing a lion-inspired character, I took some time to brush up on lion anatomy. This helped me a lot. It's easy to think you remember things you've studied in the past, but as I've said before, it's not like riding a bike. It's like holding a fistful of sand. It's constantly falling out. So back to the basics to brush up. For those who have been following this project for any amount of time, it should come as no surprise that the lion is going to be a chimera, specifically a sphinx. The fallen angel watcher known as Oz has been performing nightmarish experiments, attempting to defeat death. While the conditions of the Earth in the antediluvian era can allow for lifespans to last for centuries, they do still come to an end. He watched creation take place with his own eyes, and he has been trying to unravel the genetic notes and melodies of organic life. If he succeeds, he can create his own life, freed from the creator's built-in mortality limit. That's the hope, anyway. The lion was one of a host of attempts to mix genes like paint. Working on the scarecrow in the last video was a good reminder that while it's all well and good to design a character, presenting them like an object in a catalog just isn't enough. I took the time to redraw the scarecrow to give him more life. For the Sphinx, I started drawing him just standing there, but when doing my lion research, I found a great shot of a lion hunched over looking forlorn. It was exactly the feel I was looking for. If this does eventually become a character in Dead Gods, in some form or other, I'll take some time to draw the model sheet version, where we can see all the important details. For now, I'm happy to sacrifice those details for the sake of character. For his wings, I had every reason to give him actual living wings. Thematically, they would be perfect to show the mad, magical science aspect of his creation, But again, while doing some research, there were a lot of great classical Sphinx references that had these simplified, almost geometrical wings. They were the perfect opportunity to pull in the antediluvian Art Deco flavor. The design language of Art Deco is the perfect way to show that this world was more advanced than we typically imagine, and that it's an empire enamored with its own power that doesn't know it's reached its peak. While the oxidized copper worked fine, I also wanted to lean more on the green uranium glass as an obvious connection to the Emerald City. In my earlier sketches, I was going to make him an abomination, a failed chimera, swollen and covered in a sheet. Instead, I thought it would be crueler if the experiment was actually successful. But Oz told him he was a failure. He's forced to wear an Art Deco-inspired face mask to continue the lie. It opens up the obvious narrative opportunity that when he finds his courage, his true face is revealed. I finished him off with some scars. The wizard created him as an experiment and was glad to show him off for a time, but eventually he tired of his little folly and shut him away in his laboratory temple dungeons. I also created a brand for Oz, burned onto the lion's shoulder. So there we have it, the antediluvian cowardly lion. I'm thinking that next up will be the Tin Man. I started redesigning characters as a way to create design content for the videos while I work through sections of the story that don't require design work. I'm so glad that I did. The more of them I create, the more I'm pushed to explore what could be possible in this setting. I'm already drowning in ideas for future episodes, but now I have way more. The Tin Man. In the early stages, it all starts with the sketchbook. I still don't have a really great way to record that because I draw all over the place. I carry my sketchbook with me and draw whenever I get a spare moment. But I took those sketches, and because the version of the Tin Man that I wanted to draw was very mechanical, I thought he would be a fun one to sketch in 3D. So using Blender, I built a rough sketch model to use as an underdrawing. It's not pretty, but it gets the point across. It's mostly just to get perspective, proportions. I was able to adjust things on the fly, get the right feel. For example, I increased the size of his arms substantially in the 3D stage. But once I had enough information here, I rendered out a shot to use as my base drawing. The model is still very simple, so I just sketched right over it. To get some of the details and tubes, I used a quick hack where I used a white brush with a drop shadow around it to get outlines. It's just a quick and easy way to get more detail. But what am I drawing? So while we watch the inking play out, a bit about this guy. Like the Scarecrow, this was another person in the employ of Oz. Perhaps he was injured, perhaps he was just chosen one day because they needed a body. But he became a part of an experiment where Oz was trying to discover how little of a person was required to keep them alive. In the original story, the Tin Man was a woodsman whose axe was cursed, and it kept chopping off pieces of his body, which were then replaced until there was almost nothing left. In this case, I am also taking the opportunity to make this a bit of a RoboCop redesign because it's fun, and some of the story themes have overlap. And so now he is a head with a few key organs. His visor is meant to look like some kind of spell. It's not just holes to look through, there's some sort of magical element taking place there. His organs are like canopic jars, kept in vials and tubes. I wanted to make it look like they were clustered together in kind of a jangling mass beneath him, that you would just hear them clinking together whenever he walked around, sort of an unprotected bundle. For his limbs and body, they are still connected to his system. This green fluid that's replaced blood pumps through tubes, and I pictured his locomotion being powered similar to spiders, where it's governed by fluid pressure rather than muscle movement. For those who are familiar with my previous story, Tellurian, I am a big fan of magic robots. Robots where the detailed mechanics are not critically important. What's important is the overall character. So in this case, I wanted all of his parts to kind of reflect the Art Deco influence of Oz and his kingdom, including the green glass blade of his axe. And remember, in this setting, glass is not exactly the same fragile material we are familiar with. So there we have it, Dorothy's trio, the Cowardly Lion, the Tin Man, and the Scarecrow. I think they look pretty good together. The shared materials of oxidized copper and green glass really help to tie them together to show that they all come from the same country, really all come from the same laboratory. Three wildly different characters that are unified in their desire for revenge against the wizard. Next week, Dorothy and Toto. In this context, Dorothy and Toto are also survivors of Oz's laboratory temple. Right off the bat, for Toto, I was thinking that I already have the shipwright and bastion. so another character with another loyal dog was a bit too much overlap. But I now have chimeras handy, so why not put them to use? I thought it would be awesome if Toto was a cynocephali, a dog-headed man. He's become a loyal friend and protector. I was thinking of Toto as being part of the wizard's royal guard, one of his inner circle that, while highly skilled and specialized, he became just another test subject when inspiration struck Oz. So he's had his head replaced with that of a canine, but his original mind has been preserved. For Dorothy, I thought that she would represent a number of different experiments. One is grafting different pieces together, in the vein of Frankenstein's monster. Before Dead Gods, I was developing a project called Stridwick, and I illustrated a mummy princess character that had sections of her limbs missing, but still floating in place. So here I wanted to do something like that, where parts of her limbs are missing, but the tissue is still living on the other side of the gap, implying that there's some connection there that can't be seen. This is a way of showing that the wizard is experimenting with life in a way that looks more magical than scientific. I thought for a while about what object to give Dorothy, similar to the slippers, and I'm going with the classic book route, so silver, not ruby. Finally, I thought that the Wicked Witch of the East may have been descended from the Nephilim, so she would be quite a bit larger than average, and Dorothy would take a gauntlet instead of a slipper. So here she's wearing the oversized silver gauntlet of the Wicked Witch of the East. Dorothy's outfit is a combination of bandages and the tattered remains of whatever it was she wore before. For all of this company so far, I've been thinking of them as discarded. They were experiments, but to some extent or another they were deemed failures, so they were cast out. So for Dorothy, part of her costume looks like it's seen better days. These outcast misfits have found each other and are unified in their desire for revenge against their, not exactly creator. While adding color, somewhere along the way I realized I wasn't recording, and then admittedly, I didn't hit record. There was something kind of nice about just rendering. I was enjoying it for its own sake. So we're skipping over that, but I had fun, and now you can see it further along. I wanted to give Dorothy some of the glass as well, and I thought it would be neat to draw attention to the gaps in her limbs by adding these hollow glass elements. They contain something that allows for continuity, but we don't quite know what. We don't understand why. There's that looks like magic element. It's tapping into a science we don't know, that we don't understand yet. So it's that contrast of more advanced and more primitive. So here we have Oz is deathless. All experiments done for the sake of Oz trying to defeat death. All of them denied death in some form, unified in seeking revenge. So I quite like how this duo turned out, Dorothy and her loyal companion Toto, and when we add the other three in, I think it makes for a pretty great team. I think they look like they fit together, that they come from the same strange place. In this setting, there is a high cost to witchcraft. Toying with dark arts that are not meant for humans takes its toll on the body. It's highly destructive. My original plan was just to draw the Wicked Witch of the West. Then inspiration struck and I had an idea for Glinda as well. So as usual, I started with the sketch phase. One of the things that's particularly fun about redesigning characters in this setting is that there are elements and themes that tie in really, really well. I wanted the flying monkeys to play into this in a big way, and so I looked up prehistoric baboons and found essentially just very big baboons. In this case, one of her flying monkeys is critical to her transportation, literally carrying her around. Without them, she would be utterly immobile. The creature has had pterosaur wings grafted on. As with many of Oz's experiments, these are really more for display, and they may give it the ability to glide like a flying squirrel. Of course, this isn't just prehistoric baboon. Trusting a wild animal with complex tasks like this would be unwise. Its brain has been replaced by that of a former servant. This version of the Wicked Witch was the Wizard of Oz's personal witch. Her centuries of service have taken a drastic toll on her. Her body has been destroyed by the dark arts, but Oz plied his craft on her as well, unnaturally lengthening her life, if you want to call it that. She has been preserved. She no longer has need of limbs. As her organs weakened, Oz removed her limbs so that they could focus on what was most critical. The Wicked Witch is suspended in mysterious green fluid, a special concoction of the wizards. The orb was one of those happy accidents. Originally, I was just designing it to be a preservation vessel, but it overlaps nicely with the Wicked Witch's crystal ball, so now she's very dependent on it. The witch has been so desiccated, I imagine her skin being almost carbonized, looking more like graphite than skin. Her nose has been mummified, but to get that classic witch's pointy nose, I thought instead she would have tubes inserted into it. In lieu of the iconic pointy hat, I decided to go for long, pointy hair. She has the point, but not the brim. The Wicked Witch served her master well, but eventually she outlived her usefulness. The amount of upkeep required, along with her diminished abilities, meant that she was cast out and now seeks his destruction. So here we have the Wicked Witch of the West, another living embodiment of the consequences of dabbling in the dark arts, suspended in a concoction of life-preserving fluids, carried around by a former servant now in the body of a flying baboon. As I said, originally I wasn't going to redesign Glinda the Good Witch, but I had an idea. I thought of the Tin Man as being a rough prototype. He functioned, but he wasn't elegant. I thought it would be fun to draw a more refined version of the same technique. So I imagined that Glinda was the replacement for the Wicked Witch. She was the understudy that took over. She helped the wizard with his experiments and rituals. But over time, as happens with everyone inside Oz's circle, she fell prey to his craft as well. To ensure she lived longer than the Wicked Witch of the West, I imagined her being infused with serpent genes, but of course that only goes so far. Over time, more and more of her fell prey to black magic, and so more and more of her was replaced. Her artificial body is more refined, uses more sophisticated techniques than the Tin Man, but I still wanted to preserve the idea that the critical organs, as well as the battery that replaces the heart, are still visible. So while her limbs are still made from polished copper, her torso is glass, revealing the inner workings. All that remains is her head, a few critical organs, and an arm that is likely soon to be replaced. Working with a treacherous creature like Oz, betrayal is inevitable. Glinda turned on her master as well, but whereas the Wicked Witch sought only destruction, Glinda sought allies in Dorothy and her crew. From a material perspective, it took a lot of balancing to find a spot I was happy with when it came to the copper, the transparency of the glass, the transparency of her cape, but I like how they turned out. Finally, her wand is charged from the same electricity that powers her heart. And so here we have Glinda the Good Witch and the Wicked Witch of the West, two of Oz's personal witches that have both turned against him. And of course, I had to put the whole cast together so far. Next week will be our last stop, Oz himself. We are off to meet the wizard. Finally, after all this build-up, we get to meet the man himself. Kind of. When the characters first meet Oz, he's a big fake head. This has taken many forms over the years, from big floating holograms to giant mechanical versions. In the world of dead gods, I have giant heads, because I have giants. So of course, if I have giants at my disposal in this setting, and Oz is a giant head who specializes in messing with biology, so I thought, why make a big fake head when he could just use a Nephilim head? I've been picturing the actual Wizard of Oz being a watcher, one of the fallen angels. The giants are their offspring, so I thought it would be great if he used the severed head of one of his own offspring as a mouthpiece. Just to keep track of all of the geometry, I built a quick 3D model of the armature that the head is kept in, and then decided to just use that for the final illustration. The head has been carefully removed and then connected to tubes and pipes for hydration, fluids, oxygen flow, all of the things that are necessary. Right off the bat, you can see a large crystal stuck into its forehead. In a previous video, I talked about oracles using crystals pushed deep into the brain that just touch the pineal gland. Think of it like a mystical antenna. The head itself is technically kept alive, but it's being used more as a puppet. Brain activity is probably negligible. It's being fed the bare necessities to keep it alive. So while Nephilim are already pale, this guy is effectively turning blue. For the hydration tubes, I used a similar technique that I used in the Tin Man video, just adding a drop shadow under some white lines. This allows me to draw the tubing very quickly and evenly. I will say now, this concept is inspired by a book by C.S. Lewis. It's part of his space trilogy. I'm specifically inspired by the third book in that series, called That Hideous Strength. People who have read it will recognize the reference, but for the sake of spoilers, I won't go into too much more detail. I highly recommend it. Flowing through the tubes is the same mysterious liquid that we've seen elsewhere. It's the same liquid that's been keeping the Tin Man alive, as well as the Wicked Witch of the West. Now, I got the head to about the point where I was happy with it, but unlike the previous characters, this one really needed more of a setting. So I mocked up a very simple chamber for him. I expanded on the armature, really just to underline how dehumanizing of a position this head is in. It is purely functional. I didn't want to go as far as designing a whole room. This really more is just about atmosphere and the presentation of the wizard's head in context. so I added an extension of the tubes coming down from the machinery above. And like I said, this really is more about atmosphere and a general sense of context. So for the sake of making him seem imposing and intimidating, he just floats in darkness with mysterious green steam. To make it more of a scene, here's a moment where Dorothy has come to confront him, holding up the gauntlet that belonged to the Wicked Witch of the East. Which, this time, I remembered to draw the sixth finger, being that the Wicked Witch of the East, in this setting, was a lesser Nephilim. Saying an image is all about atmosphere is one thing, but balancing all the elements is another. So I spent quite a bit of time moving pieces around, changing up opacities, shifting colors, really just trying to find something that sold the mad scientist revelation moment of this image. The last bit of detail I added is another reference to that hideous strength. This head is not able to do much, and so whatever fluids it has in its mouth slowly leak out. Adding the drool just completes the idea that this thing does not have thoughts of its own. It is purely a mouthpiece. Finally, as much as I wanted this to be more of an establishing shot, for the sake of composition, I had to sacrifice some of it. I decided to close in on the scene itself. I think it just works better for the overall purpose of this image, where we really just want to see that head. Now we've seen the head, but of course we know that there's a man behind the curtain. Except in this case, the curtain is the curtain of reality. The real wizard doesn't live in this plane of existence. He is a watcher, one of the fallen angels, originally assigned as an overseer in this world. He has become obsessed. Originally fascinated by biological creation, his fascination turned to obsession, which turned to a desire for control, and wanted to be able to extend the lifespan of his own creations. So he started experimenting, crossing lines that ought not be crossed, quilting together different pieces, mixing and matching genetics, removing what could be removed and replacing it with his own engineering. As a fallen angel, his biology is different, far more resilient. There were many things he learned by testing them on himself, things that most living creatures couldn't endure. I thought of him seeking to increase his own knowledge, figuratively and literally. He's done things to his own brain that have left his head swollen and deformed. As a fallen watcher who has developed an extensive mastery over biology, his ego has gotten the better of him. In the angelic pantheon, one of the most impressive symbols of power, the throne guardians of heaven with their 6 wings. As a master of the secrets of biology, he decided to graft that symbol onto himself, giving himself wings. However, this was hubris, and the symbolic nature of these wings couldn't be escaped. They weren't his, and so no matter how many times they were grafted on, they always failed. But he's stubborn, and he'll wear and attempt to preserve each pair as long as he can. He's made enough modifications and adjustments to his own face that even he doesn't like to look upon it anymore, so he wears a mask. Masks are one of the most potent opportunities for symbolism. In this case, because he's waging a war against mortality itself, half of his face looks like an Art Deco sculpture of his former self. The other half is a skull with some musculature still on it. It's a reflection of his anatomical expertise, but also demonstrates that he wants control over life and death. Characters like this benefit from mystery. I decided to cover most of his body in robes that are meant to be part medical, scientific robes, and part priestly garments. In one of his elongated hands, he holds a flint knife. One of his primary tools. I imagined that this would be one that's been with him for nearly 1,000 years. A primitive tool that still does the job and that's become a cozy favorite. His limbs, much like the witches he employs, have been ruined through the dark arts that he wields. They're regularly patched, repatched, and continuously infused with preservatives. As with the head, I thought he would benefit from being shown in context. Rather than being behind a curtain, he's behind the veil of the dry places. The dry places are a mysterious, more spiritual layer or dimension to our world. I picture them as being critical infrastructure. Just like in our world, there are places like refineries, shipping yards, highway overpasses, places that are necessary, but not friendly to casual human traffic. They're kept apart because they're dangerous. The dry places are necessary to keep creation running, but they are not for humans to tread. There are different rules there, different dangers. I imagine the wizard is having a private library and laboratory set up in the dry places. There he keeps all of his secret knowledge hidden away while operating in the real world, mostly through his offspring's head. So here, over the centuries, he's carved more and more and more of the knowledge that he's acquired onto the walls. In this way, he moves through his surreal maze, adding more and more to his own knowledge. It was quite fun to invent esoteric, medical, anatomical, and magical designs on the walls. I wanted the atmosphere in here to be very unsettling, just dim, dark, seemingly abandoned. In a previous video, I talked about the dry places as being the back rooms of the antediluvian world. For as much pomp and spectacle as the wizard puts on in the real world, in his own laboratories and libraries, he's a rather pathetic creature, scurrying down quiet hallways, isolated with his obsession. So there we have it, the antediluvian cast of The Wizard of Oz. This was a very fun experiment, trying to apply the setting that I've already established to this story, and finding the overlaps revealed a lot of really cool stuff. A few people have commented, and I agree, that it would be a shame if I didn't use these in some form or another in the story itself. And I think there's actually a lot of opportunities for that going forward. So this was not just a fun side experiment. I think this has yielded some pretty great fruit. My plan is actually to pause the character redesigns for a little while as I focus on a new task.